Digitalization is reshaping product ecosystem. As the moderator, we would like to invite Mr. Ravi Gururaj, founder and CEO, Qikpod, to please join on the dais. And we would also invite the speakers with a huge round of applause. Mr. Rishad Premji, Chief Strategy Officer, Wipro. Mr. Atul, Batra, CTO, Manthan Systems, and Mrs. Vanitha, Narayanan, Chairman, IBM India Private Limited. Can we have a huge round of applause, everybody?
And to be at the product conclave. I think, we've had a lot of discussion on digital disruption this morning, but it's great to be following a Made in India product since this is the product conclave. We're going to discuss the product ecosystem, building products out of India, and even building products and nurturing the product ecosystem in the eastern region. So we have an outstanding panel. I think, I need not make any introductions. I will let each of them introduce themselves briefly when they first make their opening comments. But, I want to start with Vanitha, who runs IBM India. And, it's a big organization. It's a global company. We had the privilege of hosting your global CEO here in India a few months ago. And I know you're thinking deeply about, what we can do out of India, both build for the globe, build for the domestic market as well. And products make a big portion of what you'll do at IBM. So maybe, you can give us a sense of where you think this is going in the 5-year perspective on what disruptions we're going to see in transformations, digital transformations in the product ecosystem, Vanitha.
Thank you, Ravi, and good morning, everyone, and hello to the IBM team over here. So I'll talk about this in sort of two senses. When we look at digital disruption, everybody ascribed it to the IT industry initially. And I think what you heard from Keshav and others earlier is this is not limited to one industry. It's about it's not IT, it's technology. And the technologies that were discussed is both disrupting but also reinventing many industries. So when we as a company look at it, it's about building a set of platform capabilities. And in our case, our cloud AI platform is Watson. It's building a cognitive cloud. But with the complete realization that in today's age, and if I sort of roll back 50 years ago, we built a mainframe, which was probably the first platform in the world, which had an ecosystem. And many people in this room and others are partners in that ecosystem, hardware, software, services partners. But in today's ecosystem, it's far more asymmetric, it is far more fragmented, and it will be far more granular. And that's, again, because technology has gotten democratized in a very, very big way. So we see this as, yes, we as IBM will continue to build platforms, and these platforms will have a set of capabilities that we'll publish. So unlike 50, 60 years ago, when we shipped it to it, it's now on the cloud. So whether you're an individual developer, you are a business partner, in many different ways, you take what you want, you know what you need, and you build capabilities to deliver a product or service. So in a way, it's truly global. And we expect, because we have such a big presence in India and such a big ecosystem to tap into, that there will be a kind of innovation that comes out of India that will be very distinct and unique to the kind of innovation that comes from the West Coast, the Silicon Valley, or anywhere else. So it's about supporting that and nurturing that and really having this sort of go up so that that innovation feeds the whole marketplace.
Got it. I'll come back to you later on what specific areas you think India will differentiate, right? And where we can kind of maybe find opportunity. So Atul, I'll come back to you later. I want to go over to Rishad next. So Rishad, Wipro is a big company in the services area, clearly. What do you all have to do with product? And what is your interest in product? How are you engaging in the product ecosystem? Where do you see value being created going forward? There's lots of talk of transforming our IT industry itself. Will product play a big role there? And what's your perspective there?
No, I mean, I think the IT industry is disrupting and it's already started, right? And services are moving more and more to productized services. How can you leverage platform and build unique solutions on top of them that address a specific problem or a specific use case? So we would partner with platforms like Watson, for example, and how do we build specific solutions that are productized services that we can take to customers. You know, we've traditionally been a services company, so all our focus has been around scale, people. But more and more we're looking to partner with product companies because innovation is not happening necessarily at speed in large companies like ourselves, and it's happening in many, many smaller companies. And we can leverage those capabilities to take differentiated solutions to customers. So, you know, we've got a bunch of different things that we do. One is we've set up a fund called Wipro Ventures, which is a $100 million fund. We've partnered with about 12 companies. And the objective is exactly that. You know, how do we leverage these capabilities to take them? The investment is actually incidental. The partnership is what is most important. That's a big focus for us. You know, in India, we've partnered with about 50 different companies. Again, very, very specific use case based. And so that's a big, big part of our innovation ecosystem. And, you know, the belief that innovation is moving into an open age is a core part of the belief in the company. And that will only sort of build as time moves on.
Got it. And I'll come back to you. I'm sure people in the room would want to know more about the fund and your other engagement models. You'll do more than this fund. Even with startups, you'll have started to engage as both a customer and a go-to-market channel as well, right? So, Atul, I mean, we don't want to make this a Watson show, but, you know, I think Vanitha here has an unfair advantage. But, you know, you're doing something on Watson as well from Manthan, which is, you know, a smaller company than Wipro and IBM, but bigger than many startups. And you'll have been a startup more recently than maybe IBM and Wipro have. So tell us, you know, where you see this going from a digital transformation perspective.
Yeah, okay. So let me set some broader context. So firstly, it's a great honor to be on this panel. Great pleasure to be here in Kolkata. We were just talking over breakfast. I think Kolkata, with the design talent, the data sciences talent, could be the next big destination in terms of technology in India and you know, the world potentially. So, you know, my perspective is, I think we have to think of it as we're really living in the future today. I think we may not realize that, but if you really look at, you know, when you were growing up reading science fiction, you know, novels, seeing movies, remember Star Trek, I think who would have imagined today that your commute from, you know, home to work would be driven through a machine? Who would have thought that what you shop for and what you ultimately buy would be curated through a machine, right? So you may not realize it, but we are living in the future. And if you look at the history of computing, I think we need to go back a little bit. I think we had, you know, the mainframe movement in the 50s, 60s. Then we had, you know, personal computing come along. We had, you know, remember client server, the internet, mobile devices, cloud, SaaS, and so on. So basically what that's done is we have a massive data movement, right? So we have a data movement. Now with compute and storage and processing and security being a commodity on the cloud, what we've arrived at, and it's a very significant thing, is the era of AI, right? So I think it's very important to recognize that, to call it out, to plant that flag, because I think it's like a tsunami. It's going to disrupt every single vertical industry, product space we can think of. It'll impact how we do business, how, you know, as consumers, you know, we spend our time and what we think about, right? So it's a very, very significant disruption. So to your question, Ravi, I think there'll be three categories in this whole AI era, right? Which is, you know, obviously machine learning, deep learning, NLP, there's a bunch of other technologies. Which will be, one will be the core companies that will build that AI. So, you know, Vanitha talked about IBM Watson, that's a great example. A very horizontal platform that will give you that, you know, AI capability. The second category will be around companies that consume AI, right? And they build products and they, you know, cater to business needs. The third would be obviously the businesses that will consume them. So I think it's very important to understand the three segments and be very clear on, you know, which segment you're in, what is your use case, and you know, sort of take advantage of that. But it's very important, again, to understand this era we're living in and how to leverage it, because if we don't do that, you know, if you're a business, you may, you know, be less competitive. For example, if you're a product company, you may not be relevant tomorrow, right?
Right.
Can I make a comment on that? Which I think it's very important to the point that Atul was making, to identify the use case correctly. Because I find people are oftentimes disappointed with the technology based on the use case that they pick. Point one. Two is to expect 100% accuracy with AI also, I think, is flawed to a certain extent. And so people expect it to be a perfect replacement it may also be challenging in many, many instances.
And so what, do you have a recommendation for product folks in the audience here? What's the best way to go to validate your product, your idea? What would you look for? And Vanitha, the same question to you. If a product company were to come to you and say, okay, we want to dance with the giants now, and we want you all to take us to market or invest in us, what minimum bar are you looking for in terms of, okay, this makes sense, I want to engage?
Yeah. So I'll speak from our perspective. We look for a product market fit, right? So we want to ensure that the product actually has been validated, even if it's in POCs or some pilots, not necessarily in a production scale environment. So we're not comfortable taking a technology risk. We want to be comfortable with the technology. We're very happy taking a market adoption risk and helping the technology actually scale. And so one of the values I think we try and bring is the go-to-market access, because we work with big customers. And so can we leverage the technology into solutions that we take to take them to our customers more broadly.
And you basically, your customer platform would then be open to the partners that you engage with.
Correct. And we're also learning working with smaller companies.
Sure.
We're not used to working with companies that are very, very small, and we're also going through our own evolution, but we recognize that it's incredibly important to do that to eventually be successful.
Now, I think the big companies now are learning to dance with the giant, with the toddlers, let's say, more than they've ever had to before, right? Vanitha, you're at IBM, you're constantly interacting with the startup ecosystem, the product ecosystem, the innovation ecosystem broadly. What are the different engagement models? What is the path to success for Indian startups, let's say?
So at multiple levels, Ravi. One is, so let me start with the go-to-market, because Rishad touched on it. It has to have value. So when you look at, because you're constantly looking at it in terms of a client. So when our teams are trying to deliver a solution for the client, the obvious value that we expect from the startup is that they've got a tremendous insight and capability. Manthan's a perfect example, in an area that they're going to add unique value. So that unique value proposition has to be there. Second, you've got to sort of think about, because once you go into an enterprise space, there is a certain level of, this has to have all the reliability, the security, all the things that you would expect a customer's business and brand to be exposed to. So it's not just that it's a cool product, but it can fit into all of the requirements of a broader enterprise context, right? Especially if we are. And the third part is, and we talked about data, and and particularly when we go into this, and I think it's important for particularly product companies, you have a platform, and yes, today it's about value creation with data. And I think it's very important for people to have clarity around whose data you're using, what outcomes are you delivering, and how are you ensuring that there is privacy and there's security. You've got to sort of answer the data questions so that when you're going to a client, you can tell a client, I've got this data and I'm bringing, or I have sourced this data, and therefore I know I can deliver these kind of insights. And it's important for companies like ours, where we're working with client-specific data. So there is a level of socially available data. But beyond that, you've got to be very clear in terms of, so that's in the go-to-market. In the product development, I think Rishad was absolutely right. This is about how do you, take product companies that again have thought through what their value proposition is, and that's where we know that we're going to build platforms, we're going to build capabilities, but we're not going to have solutions for every market, every domain, every area. So then it's our job to support them with the technical experts, with the product experts, with the platform experts, so that they can take that initial, if you will, proof of concept and that product idea to something that is more ruggedized and ready for market.
Got it. So, I'll ask a follow-up question to both you and Rishad before I go to Atul. You've had teams now engaged with the startup ecosystem, the product ecosystem in India for the past couple of years, let's say, and maybe longer than that even, but more formally in the last couple of years. But you're also engaging in other ecosystems, Silicon Valley, Israel. In your internal kind of benchmarks, where do you think we stack? How are we doing? What are areas that you are concerned about? What do you see as opportunity areas? Just a candid assessment.
No, look, our customers are enterprise customers, and many of the startups in India initially have been more focused on the consumer side as opposed to the enterprise side. So that's why there's a bias towards companies in the US versus here. But from a quality of company perspective, we find them no different. And we're not biased we're open to the ecosystem globally, and wherever we can find companies that help us address pain points within customers, we will work with them, right?
So, Vanitha, you have CTOs who come through and, at some point, certain curated startups meet with them or product companies meet with them. What has the impression been, and, are there certain learnings or insights you've gained?
So I think where the Indian companies, the startups stand out is the innovation model. So if we sort of say the Silicon Valley startups are sort of focusing on the top $1.5 billion, the fact that a lot of the Indian startups really look at the problem statement from an India unit economics and what is viable for this market, I think that because the design point is different. So I think there it's very innovative, very original. If we look at where I think this ecosystem is still maybe a little bit different than some of the others, I think we're still sort of seeing a higher success rate here, and that whether you consider that good or bad, right? Because typically in the West we'll probably see that it's about a 10% success rate as they mature through. Here it's still about the 30%. So in some ways, I think we probably have to apply a greater level of rigor as we go through that, that stage of from initial success to sustainable success. Probably need to go through a little more maturity model in the startup ecosystem.
You want us to have a higher mortality rate.
Or a higher rigor, so we get through that. And I think that is probably...
Fair enough. So, I want to introduce Atul's new role, right? He has taken over as chair of the product council at NASSCOM. Congratulations. With that comes a lot of burden and expectations, I should warn you. Atul, we've been talking about the product ecosystem. Tell us a little bit about what we're doing in NASSCOM from the product ecosystem perspective, with particular reference to, let's say, East as well, right?
So by the way, I'm filling very big shoes. Ravi was the past chair. So I think India has a huge opportunity when I talked about AI, in particular around AI automation, to build the next big, company out of India and, potentially build the next IBM Watson out of India. That's sort of our goal. So the product council is it's a new council. We have a very good mix of large companies, growth stage companies, early stage companies as well. What we are trying to do is focus on trying to champion, grow and evangelize the India product ecosystem across all segments, across all regions. So we've taken on a couple of initiatives around, one is around mentoring, the other is around connects. We're trying to bring together the entrepreneurs with business. I think we've talked about that India is the next big digital opportunity. It could be a very, very large opportunity. In fact, the other day I was looking at a report where our GDP is projected to almost touch 20 trillion by 2030, by some study that was done, right? So think about that 8-9x growth in the next 13 years. I think it's going to come on the back of a lot of this automation, technology, AI, right? So we really want to help that whole process, right, in terms of getting there. So I talked about connects. We have a lot of mentoring, programs in place. We're looking to help incubate some, real deep tech startups. I talked about the two categories. One is the core AI platforms itself, right? I think there's a lot of opportunity for those platforms to come out of academia. I mean, we have a lot of good research done in India in, academic institutions. Try and get that out, pair it with an entrepreneur and create the next big thing, right? Second, I talked about the consumption of AI. So I think today the selling is moved to business, right, as opposed to just the CIO. So to look at very specific use cases that solve, very important business problems, right, on the back of AI, right? So that's another opportunity when we look at that space, right? So overall, we're looking to really engage with academia, business, bring, the whole product ecosystem together across, the whole value chain and try and grow in from there.
Great, thank you. So we'll take some questions from the audience. If you could just stand up and raise your hand or stand up, we can get some mics out to you. If there are questions.
There's some back there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, please go ahead. We'll get a mic there. Just go ahead. I'll repeat your question. Yeah, go ahead. Can we get a mic? Yeah, take this one.
But just scream and he'll repeat it.
I'll repeat it. Yeah, so what is the enabling infrastructure, right, in the second tier and third tier cities to help product companies flourish? I think, he's pointing out to internet connectivity. It could be other things as well, skills, or ecosystem, peers, whatever. Where do you see that going? Are we going to see this natural gravitation to the 4 or 5 big metros?
No, I think that's where, if you look at all the initial focus of Digital India, it's been around broadband. So you're absolutely right. If you don't have, it's not just about having access, it's also affordable access, right? So there is, I think we'd all sort of agreed that over the last few years, the broadband penetration is getting better and is getting more affordable. But you're right, it's got a little ways to go. And I think as we look at, in fact, a lot of the dialogue that is now being encouraged between those of us in different industry bodies and with the government is, it's not just about smart cities, but it's about smart communities, smart villages, and getting this all the way through. So power and broadband is critical. It's a journey. I think we're better than we are. And I'd say even companies, whether it's companies like us and others, are also, and this is where the Indian innovation comes in, we have both partners as well as work that we do out of India, which assumes that your network connectivity is not going to be continuous and as robust. So in building some of the apps where it's light, so we build apps that are light, we build products that are lightweight, assuming that there's not going to be that robust of a network. So it's a push and a pull. I would say it's getting better, but the next 24 months, we probably are going to be in a distinctly different place than we are today.
So I hope that answers your question. And yeah, go ahead. You got a mic. Good question. I think these are discussions we've had at the NASSCOM, EC level, and other organizations, NASSCOM. What do we do to update the curriculum? How do we inject some of these technologies that are going to be, critical in the future into the engineering programs, at least?
So I can start. So what we've started with is looking at what these technologies are, making sure that they are very clearly mapped, and then to try and influence academia to bring them into the curriculum. I think a lot of the learning is happening outside the large institutions as well. Today all the content is available online. There are all kinds of institutes and all. So we want to create templates where, we map the latest technologies in terms of how they need to be, taught and, consumed and so on, and how they map to potentially building the next generation of products, right? So all of that is underway. We're also we're trying to work with tier 2, tier 3 cities and towns where we bring a lot of the thinking that we've, created at the metro level, right? In terms of, product entrepreneurship, how to build companies, how to scale businesses and so on. So all of that, is part of the education as well.
And the only point I would add is that I think there should also be some thinking on how you can leverage this to actually train teachers as well. Right? There's 7 million teachers in government schools today, and this can be a great mechanism of helping significantly elevate the quality of teachers who greatly influence the quality of students that come out. So I think it's worth thinking on those lines as well, where a lot of the thinking is oftentimes on the student side.
Okay. We'll take 2 more questions. Go ahead.
My question is like, we are just having an MVP ready and we are already beginning to fight pain. Right now, what we see is that the clients are seeing a lot more features which is actually a good product. And we are a B2B segment, so we are an enterprise product. Now, my question is, what is will it be a bad feedback that we go out with the MVP to the market and the client says it's just an MVP and we get a bad image for us? Or should we hold a little longer and adding all the other features and then when the product is completely ready, we should go to the market?
Got it. So, Vanitha, this is oftentimes the kiss of death, right? You get your first 5 customers, each has a set of requests for you, and then the company collapses of featureitis, right? Where do you end up? So what guidance would you have for?
And it doesn't happen just to startups. It can happen to big companies too. So, and I think this is where, the discussion we had, particularly if you're a startup, you have to have tremendous clarity that your MVP, it's minimum, but it's also viable. So the value proposition with what you have should be viable for you to be able to say, I'm going to do this for you, Mr. or Miss Customer, and I'm going to do it really well, and this is how you're going to get value out of it in this phase. I'm not going to go try and do everything in this first phase, because otherwise you will never get beyond that first delivery. And all of your talent will be consumed. So, and if you then start to do 5 things and start getting mediocre at 5 things, then you're not going to see that next leg. So as you sort of define what it is, make sure it's focused. So I would say rather than minimum, I would say it's focused and it's viable. And then do it better than anybody else, because that's why you're doing it, versus where companies who are trying to please a lot of different stakeholders, right? And then stay committed. And what you'll find is, if what you're providing is truly valuable, the client may not like it, but they will understand. And I think that's where the culture is shifting, because companies know that they want the innovation of a startup and the agility of a startup. They can't immediately expect it to have a whole lot of breadth either.
And I will just add, if I can, that we oftentimes actually get nervous when we're engaging with a company that's painting the perfect end-to-end picture. We'd much rather have a company that has built something that works and has a plan to get there in phases, and and communicates that to us that very, very clearly, as opposed to this perfect picture which is not sort of viable today.
If I could add to that, so in this cloud plus AI world, the definition of MVP is completely changed. What you should look at is one case, and like Vanitha was saying, do it extremely well. I'll give you an example. Abandoned shopping cart is over a $1 trillion opportunity. If someone can take the right algorithm and build something on a SaaS model and offer it, it can be a killer.
One last question. I've already got somebody on the mic. Fantastic question, because that was going to be my closing ask of each of you. Any, one or two tips for product companies in the audience, with the India perspective and your corporate or product company hat on?
So one of the things I would say, and there are many, but it's be original. Right? So it's not about precisely saying, I'm going to take something somebody else does and I'll just do it better, because that person or somebody else is going to be doing that as well. So I think original is extremely important. Yes, you can take some ideas and improvise, but it may not be completely sustainable. So originality in terms of the innovation, whatever the scope, and scale is. Second, I think this is something that's a strength. But we shouldn't get distracted, and we should get the point that some of our initial innovations were consumer, particularly as you start to, it's business to person, but it's also enterprise at global scale. We have to be very, very rigorous in terms of the engineering and all the way through the business model. So equally important, it's got to be very, very well engineered, but you've got to have a business model that says that there is monetization and where you're monetizing. Because in today's world, because we're three different companies, we're all partners, we can all be collaborating in an ecosystem, we could be competing, and that's the new world. And we could be adding value to each other's products and services at different points of intersection in different ways. So I think the clarity in terms of how you're monetizing needs to be, thought out.
Got it. Great. Atul?
So I would say pick your vision and mission. Let's assume it's day zero very carefully. Make sure it's a...
So, somebody asked me or keep asking me what drives me to, so enthusiastically organize these events. So, this is what drives me. I get an opportunity with an excuse. I can have photographs with them and give memento to them.
You come in the middle.
Thank you so much, everybody. So yes,